consumption, as well as flouting strict French rules on sales periods. And get this, the country's ecological transition minister, they've got a minister for that, agrees that it encourages consumerism and impacts the environment negatively. The Black Friday ban is to be tagged onto an anti-waste bill up for debate early next month. Sally, what do you think? What are the French onto? Are they onto something here?
Are they going to ban Christmas shopping as well? Or how about Easter or Mother's Day and Father's Day? They'll be out the window. Oh, I think that's being a bit much of a nana state, and I don't think it makes sense at all.
Bill, we talk about...
I was just going to say, mate, it shows how these environmental activists who are pushing for this are actually, in fact, middle class and out of touch, because there's a hell of a lot of poor people out there use opportunities, sales opportunities like this to get what they desperately need. Because they're wealthier, these guys say, "Oh, we don't need to do this sort of thing. This is an outrage." Well, if you're poor and your wallet's nearly empty, it's a good thing to have a Black Friday.
But speaking of this Black Friday, I suddenly got a big interest in it today, and I saw in the Business Herald there was a research conducted by price comparison website Price Spy, and they found that 1 in almost 10 products listed on its website, this is in New Zealand, actually increased in price last year on Black Friday, and that discounts offered on some products were way below what consumers expected from the Black Friday day. And perfume increased by an average of 3% during the Black Friday weekend, and some laptops, televisions and electronics increased in price as well. So beware.
In the entertainment world, we talk about tentpole events, and I reckon the retail guys, they have an amazing ability to create this thing, we must buy. This is a month before Christmas, right? I mean, sure, we can get some great deals for Christmas presents, but it was Singles Day earlier this month that was taken on from the Chinese market. This Valentine's Day, this Teachers' Day. Bill, there's too many days.
There's no Bill days, though. Have you ever noticed that? There's no day for me.
We'd better make one. Bill, we can make Bill the president of Hawke's Bay, and we can have Bill Day.
Bill, have you ever indulged in one of these sales online where there's, all these magic days?
No, I can't stand the thought of it. Can imagine that. I mean, anybody that goes to one of those things, I've seen television pictures of them, they deserve to get whatever bargain they can find.
Well, people have been killed, haven't they, in the rush? Yeah, it's quite crazy. I think we've got time to squeeze one more in. We've got about a minute. The company Rocketworks, the founder, Dean Hall, he's sometimes a panellist here at RNZ National, actually. Incredible pay and conditions for his staff, median of $80,000 a year salary, unlimited leave on offer. But there are some challenges that some people who are entitled to unlimited leave take fewer days than those with restricted entitlements. Can you believe that, Sally?
I can, actually.
Guilt.
It would just seem, I've got to do this, and I'll save it up and want to do the right thing, and I'm with this fantastic new company, so I can see that happening.
Bill, you wouldn't be shy to take extra leave, would you?
Probably not. In fact, I'm taking about 52 weeks of the year now. I'm 66. I just want to retire, But I noticed my wife, who's only, I won't mention her age, but she's younger than I am, and she's continuing to work really hard and just going hammer and tongs at it. And because she's self-employed, that's the worst thing when you've got a self-employed investment in your business. You never stop.
Sally Wenley and Bill Ralston on the panel today. Thank you so much for your input. It's been fantastic. Hope you've enjoyed our show. Join us tomorrow at 3:45 p.m. here on RNZ National.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere aki nei. Samoa's measles crisis deepens. The death toll rises to 39 after 6 more children aged under 4 have died. Our reporter Alex Perrottet has just arrived in Apia. He'll join us live. The Prime Minister delivers a wholehearted and wide-ranging apology to the families of those who perished in the Erebus disaster. The daughter of a flight engineer on board that day says the weight has lifted from her shoulders. Fletcher Building signals a resolution over Ihumātao is nigh, but what is it? A woman is sentenced to 2 years in prison for the country's largest ever synthetic cannabis bust. And how big is too big to play schoolboy rugby?
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora ko Susana Leata with DNA. The Prime Minister says today's Erebus apology is the first time there's been official recognition of Air New Zealand's culpability in the country's worst air disaster. The government and the airline have apologised unequivocally to the families of the 257 people who died in the 1979 crash at Mount Erebus in Antarctica. Neither the government nor Air New Zealand have made a full apology before. Jacinda Ardern said she was making the apology on behalf of the government and the airline.
After 40 years, on behalf of today's government, the time has come to apologise for the actions of an airline, then in full state ownership, which ultimately caused the loss of the aircraft and the loss of those you loved. This apology is wholehearted and wide-reaching. We will never know your grief, but I know the time has come to say I'm sorry.
Jacinda Ardern. Air New Zealand's chair, Dame Teresa Walsh, apologised on behalf of the airline for failing in its duty of care for the passengers and crew.
And I apologise again on behalf of the airline for the way in which the families of those lost on Mount Erebus were treated in the aftermath of the incident. Better care should have been taken of you.
Dame Therese told the crowd Air New Zealand learned many lessons from Erebus and safety is now paramount and non-negotiable in everything it does. Leaked documents show the secretive foundation that loans money to New Zealand First was set up to seek donors for the party with benefits for each tier of donation. The Electoral Commission is currently looking into the New Zealand First Foundation and party after questions were raised about compliance with electoral law. The documents contain a proposal to set up a fund modelled on the National Party's National Foundation, saying New Zealand First had been unsuccessful at raising money. The proposal recommended creating a tiered donation structure with benefits for each tier. The documents show Winston Peters was at a March 2017 board meeting where the proposal was agreed to and the board recommended he be asked to choose a legal advisor to set up the foundation. Earlier this month, Mr Peters told reporters he looked after the political wing of the party and the foundation was an administrative matter. Paying for extra teachers helped land 36 schools in serious financial difficulty last year. Auditors say the Education Ministry had to underwrite the schools to keep them running. Our education correspondent, John Gerritsen, reports.
The Auditor-General says the schools in difficulty spent on average the equivalent of 81% of their operations grant on teachers, well above the norm of 60 to 71%. The report says 66 schools broke the law last year, 42 by borrowing more than allowed and 10 because they lent money to their teachers. It warns that more schools are at risk of breaking their borrowing limits, largely due to finance leases for IT equipment. The report also warns some schools are not putting enough money aside to cover property maintenance, and hundreds are failing to publish their annual reports online. Ko John Gerritsen, TNA.
One person has died after falling from an overbridge onto the motorway in Auckland. The police are attending the incident at the Hobsonville Road overbridge on the northwestern motorway. City-bound lanes underneath the overbridge have been closed. The US President Donald Trump has signed into law a bill approved in support of pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong. China has condemned the legislation as gross interference in its internal affairs. The US Congress has also approved a ban on selling crowd control weapons to Hong Kong, as the BBC's Nick Beake reports.
At a time when the US and China are locked in a trade war, this new legislation will check that Hong Kong, a Chinese territory, retains enough autonomy to justify favourable US trading terms that have helped it maintain its position as a world financial centre. The US Congress passed a second bill, which Trump also signed, banning the export to Hong Kong police of crowd control munitions, such as tear gas, pepper spray, rubber bullets and stun guns.
Nick Beake reporting. The latest survey results show a growing audience for RNZ's radio stations. The GfK Radio Industry Survey shows that 676,500 New Zealanders, or 15.6% of people aged over 10, tune into RNZ National or RNZ Concert each week. RNZ National is the leading station nationally by time listened and by market share. Also, 835,000 1,000 users now engage with the RNZ website in a typical week, up 37% on last year. It's 5 minutes past 5. All-rounder Daryl Mitchell will make his Test debut in New Zealand's second cricket test against England on his home ground in Hamilton tomorrow. Mitchell, the son of former All Blacks coach John Mitchell, replaces the injured Colin de Grandhomme. Pace bowler Trent Boult will also miss the match due to a rib injury, but the Black Caps are holding off making a decision on his replacement until tomorrow morning, with either Matt Henry or uncapped fast bowler Lockie Ferguson set to come into the side. The Black Caps bowling coach Shane Jurgensen says it's not simply about what they expect the pitch will do when it comes to considering their bowling options.
Usually offers a little bit for the fast bowlers and the seamers. Then, particularly if it gets a little bit hot, it becomes a pretty good pitch. So it's always. But the exciting part about Hamilton, it's not so much the pitch; it's the actual conditions here. The ball tends to swing because it's a little bit humid than other places. So probably look above as opposed to looking at the pitch.
Shane Jurgensen. Liverpool and Chelsea will both need at least a draw in their final group match to make sure of progressing to the last 16 of football's European Champions League. Defending champs Liverpool were held to a 1-1 draw by Napoli at Anfield. Liverpool top their group with 10 points, with Napoli a point behind and Salzburg on 7. Chelsea drew 2-2 at Valencia, leaving both teams second in the group on 8 points, 2 behind Ajax. That's the news.
Vegans stop shoppers from getting their meat fix.
I used to eat meat 3 times a day, like most people do, until I found out what actually happens for that meat to be on my plate.
Trump shows a lot of flesh.
Show us that gorgeous chest. We've never seen a chest quite like it.
And they're made of a tougher cut in windy Castle Point.
I only somewhat joking says don't ask me if it's windy till it's over 120k, because it doesn't really seem that strong.
Sink your teeth into the meaty issues. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on air and online.
Then on 9 to noon, why the world must act to prevent a mountain of waste EV batteries as more and more consumers switch to electric transport. And after 10, cultural historian Kristen Godsey on her seductive premise that women have better sex under socialism. But there's a serious side. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula, fine spells, scattered showers developing tonight, some possibly heavy tomorrow afternoon and tomorrow night. Waikato to Manawatu, including Bay of Plenty, Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Central High Country. Fine spells, scattered showers mainly inland during the afternoons and evenings, some heavy with possible thunderstorms. Horowhenua to Wellington, including Wairarapa, cloudy periods. Nelson and Bulla, fine spells, isolated showers inland during the afternoon tomorrow. Marlborough and Canterbury, fine tonight, becoming cloudy tomorrow with scattered showers. Westland, showers spreading north tonight, retreating inland tomorrow morning and clearing by tomorrow night. Fiordland, rain clearing overnight. Otago and Southland, fine spells, a few showers tonight, possibly thundery about inland Clutha, Dunedin and North Otago. Cloudy areas tomorrow with isolated showers in Otago. Chatham Islands, low cloud showers developing tomorrow evening. RNZ National, it's 8.5 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna. And this is Checkpoint. Let's head straight to Samoa now, where the death toll from the country's measles epidemic has risen to 39 following 6 more deaths in the past 24 hours. It's the third day in a row that deaths have risen as the government races against time to vaccinate the entire population. Our reporter Alex Perrottet has just arrived in Samoa. He'll join us shortly. But first, Mackenzie Smith on why officials are warning the worst is still to come.
Since an outbreak was declared in October, measles in Samoa has spread like wildfire. In just 2 weeks, the death toll has risen from 6 to 39. Most of the dead are children under the age of 4, including the 6 who passed away in the past 24 hours. Samoa's Director General of Health, Leausa Dr. Take Naseri, says not enough children are being vaccinated.
We are still not satisfied with the coverage of the 6 months to the 4 years. We still haven't crossed 40% of that age group. The other age groups are doing steadily, but we are still worried that most of the kids are not coming forward or not being brought by their parents.
A mass vaccination campaign is underway in Samoa, with dozens of doctors and nurses from New Zealand and Australia assisting. In just under 2 weeks, Samoa has managed to immunise nearly 45,000 people. But at a press conference on Wednesday, Lealsa said when children are brought in, their condition is often too severe to save them.
The average number is about 5 to 6 days since the onset of their symptoms and signs. So they really presented late to the hospital, and associated complications are quite high, and most have resulted in death.
As of this afternoon, 190 people with the disease remain in hospital, including 25 critically ill children and pregnant women. And Lealsa Dr. Take Naseri says the epidemic hasn't yet reached its peak. Meanwhile, 28 inmates sick with measles at Samoa's largest prison are in indefinite isolation. The acting Commissioner of Prisons, Levaupolo Rosa Siaosi, says all prisoners at Tanu Malala have now been vaccinated and family visits have been banned. She says the sick inmates are recovering well.
But just for precautionary measures, we're just trying to put them still in the isolation block until they're fully cleared. I know that the Ministry of Health is quite busy at the moment with all the measles cases, so I think we'll just isolate them for now.
The streets of Samoa were quiet today as the nation grappled with the growing death toll. A Red Cross health delegate who arrived in the capital Apia on Sunday, Karen Page, gives a grim outlook.
It will get worse before it gets better. Yeah, everything's sort of shuttered down here in some ways. The schools have been closed. Children, young people can't go to public gatherings. The big swimming pool in Apia is closed.
Karen Page says it could take weeks before gains from the current immunisation campaign kick in. Samoa is currently only vaccinating children up to the age of 19 and women aged between 20 and 35. For Checkpoint, this is Mackenzie Smith.
Our reporter Alex Perrottet and multimedia journalist Logan Church have just arrived in Samoa. Alex joins us now on the Live View. Alex.
Talofa lava, Lisa. I'm here at the Tupua Tamasese Mea Ole Hospital. That's the main hospital here in Samoa's capital, Apia. As you heard just there, terrible and tragic news overnight. 6 more deaths. It went up from 33 to 39 deaths overnight. And not just that, Lisa, we are seeing 250 more cases overnight as well. So we've got almost 3,000 cases of measles in this country. I just want to draw a little comparison to New Zealand, where there's just over 2,000 current cases of measles. If we applied the same rate according to the population to New Zealand, we'd be seeing 70,000 cases in New Zealand and over 800 dead. So that's what it means to this very, very small but very close and connected community of Samoa.
You flew over today on Air Samoa. Did you notice any particular precautions on the flight or at the airport?
Well, Logan and I were talking just as we were coming into land, and we were both reflecting at the fact that there were no apparent messages given out, just like you would if there was a biosecurity scare or some other health scare. So we were surprised that there were very few people with face masks on the plane or even at the airport. There was one banner that we saw which could easily be ignored as you're walking past customs to go and collect your bags. So we just commented that, we would have expected perhaps some stronger, some clearer messages coming out, particularly to those who are arriving in the country in the middle of this epidemic. I did speak to one mother who was returning here for a holiday. She said that her 2 children who were with her had both their main shot, their MMR vaccine, as well as their booster shot, but they even got another one more recently before they came, just to be sure. And you can understand that very clear paranoia that the people have as they're coming in here. But we're yet to see strong messages that are going out in public. We've just arrived. We'll be seeing what those messages are in the next couple of days.
So obviously there is a mass vaccination program going on there at the moment, and where is that at?
Okay, so the numbers are impressive. So before the mass vaccination program started, there were over 30,000 vaccinations. And since 7 days ago, where they initiated this mass vaccination program, there's been over 40,000 vaccinations. But you've got to break the figures down and look at who is getting vaccinated. A lot of people between the ages of 5 and 19 years old, and even people older than that, are rocking up and getting the jab. It's the children between 6 months and 4 years old where there's already been 20 deaths. They are the lowest uptake of vaccinations, so that's the concern. Lisa, there are 945 people in the 1 to 4 year old category who are sick with measles. There's a lot of them sick in hospital, but a whole lot more. Where are they? That's the question we're going to be asking in the next couple of days. Are they being quarantined, or are they back in their villages with their families with the disease?
Thanks, Alex. That's our reporter, Alex Perrottet, who is in Apia. And Alex will be joining us after 6 with more on the measles outbreak there. Key documents about a mysterious foundation loaning money to New Zealand First have been leaked to RNZ, detailing why the New Zealand First Foundation was set up, how it would operate and who knew about the idea from the outset. The documents show Winston Peters, who has tried to distance himself from the foundation, was at a New Zealand First board meeting in March 2017, where the board agreed to the concept of establishing the foundation. Another document details how the foundation will operate and talks about seeking donors who would then be offered a tiered donation structure with benefits adhering to each tier. Guyon Espiner has been investigating and joins me now in the studio. Guyon, this sounds fascinating. So what do the documents show?
Well, Lisa, these documents take us right back to the very start, the very time when the idea, the concept of this New Zealand First Foundation was first started. Now, one of them is from May of 2017. The title of this document we've got is a proposal to establish a strategic fundraising and management vehicle for New Zealand First. It sets out how this would work. It says it would be a legally established autonomous organisation operating independently of the party board. It talks about contributors and how that would work. It says contributors will be support for money for the party, and then this tiered donation structure will kick in. It says there'll be different benefits depending on which tier you are. So what level of donor you are, different benefits would adhere to that, but it does not go into exactly what the benefits would be offered to donors.
And we don't know what makes you gold class donor as such.
We don't know that. What this does is sets out the idea right from the outset and how it will work. We don't know what those benefits are. It does not say that in the document.
Okay, so does it tell us anything about why they felt the need to set this up?
It comes down to money, unsurprisingly, but their frustration at their ability to fundraise. It's very clear from this document. It says that the electorates are generally pretty weak and that the board itself is having trouble raising money. And it talks about needing to find a better model to actually do this. And it looks to the National Party. And there's a very interesting quote here. The precedent is clear, this document says. It is the National Party's national foundation. In essence, this proposal suggests a cloning of that model into the New Zealand First Foundation. It goes on to say that National's model is legally sound and operated in a manner that meets all legal and ethical obligations. So they are looking to National and, in their words, cloning their model.
Biggest form of flattery, isn't it, to follow on from what someone else has done? So, okay, what do we know about how it would all operate?
Well, they talk about setting up a capital fund. A capital protected fund is the words that they're using, and they explain what they mean by this, that the contributions that go into it would never be removed, and instead they'll be invested, and the proceeds would ensure this revenue stream for the party, right? So that is to establish a stable and diverse fund for the party to support their activities in the long term. They're very much about that. They say that that will eliminate the ad hoc nature of their fundraising efforts so far.
So never touch the principle.
That's what they say, right. Although there are doubts from people that I've spoken to about whether that has always actually been the case. We don't know. There is nothing in these documents to suggest how the money has actually been spent. These documents that we got talk about how this was set up, why this set up, what the idea was.
Okay, another critical thing that you've been seeking information on, and he hasn't been saying a lot, is Winston Peters. So does this shed any light on the role he has played or not?
Well, it absolutely does. And you'll remember that, as you say there, he's tried to distance himself quite a lot from the foundation. He was asked by media a few days back, and he responded by saying, quote, "I look after the political wing of New Zealand First. This is an administrative matter and you've got to ask somebody else," end quote. So we have been looking for what his role is. What we've got now is proof that Winston Peters was there at that March 2017 board meeting. We know that. We know that this meeting of the board where this idea was suggested, he was there. We know that they went on to say that this would be a permanent, a constantly operating entity at this board meeting where he was, and would reflect the maturity of the party. So it's not a passing reference. There's detailed information, or at least some information about that, and he was there at that meeting. Now, we also know from other documents that a couple of months later, in May, there was a recommendation to the board of New Zealand First to agree to the concept of establishing this foundation. And then this is key too, that they would then request the leader to select an appropriate legal advisor to develop the model that they've been talking about. That is the recommendation. Of course, we know now the two trustees are Brian Henry, who's Winston Peters' lawyer, and Doug Willerton, a former MP who runs his own lobbying firm called the Lobbyist. Now, I tried to talk to Doug Willerton today. He won't say anything on the record about this at all. I've tried him many times. He said no. I did talk to the Electoral Commission. They said they're looking into questions raised about New Zealand First and the New Zealand First Foundation regarding compliance with the requirements for donations and loans. So that's where they're at.
And no further word from Winston Peters at this stage?
No, but we'll be trying him for comment on his role and the fact that he was present at that meeting where it was suggested.
Thanks for that. That's Guy on Espiner with the latest in that ongoing saga around the New Zealand First Foundation. Some interesting documents that RNZ and Guyon has dug up. We will keep you posted with any developments. It is 22 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We're keen for your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. Let us know your thoughts on electoral donations. Do we need more transparency? What do you make of this foundation? Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Or the old-fashioned way, email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, has apologised wholeheartedly to the families of the 257 people lost in the Erebus disaster for the first time in a ceremony marking the 40th anniversary of the flight. Both the government, which was in full ownership of Air New Zealand at the time, and the airline itself have unequivocally apologised. Almost 500 family members of Erebus victims were at Government House in Auckland for today's ceremony. Families have welcomed the apology as a weight off their shoulders and say it's a huge relief. Our cameraman, Nick Monroe, and reporter Jordan Bond filed this report.
40 years since New Zealand's greatest loss of life outside of a war, and the grief remains. One major loose end was resolved today. The first full apology from the government and the airline for failures which led to the deaths of 257 people.
And the time has come to end piecemeal acknowledgements. After 40 years, on behalf of today's government, the time has come to apologise for the actions of an airline, then in full state ownership, which ultimately caused the loss of the aircraft and the loss of those you loved. This apology is wholehearted and wide-reaching. We will never know your grief, but I know the time has come to say I'm sorry.
A sense of relief washed over Dan Maloney. His father, Nick Maloney, was the flight engineer on TE 901.
It was special. I just about had tears in my eyes when they started talking about an apology. You know, it was emotional. It sort of, it's spiritual. It was incredible. So thank you, Jacinda, and thank you to the chair at Air New Zealand.
Air New Zealand has never apologised in full for its role in the country's worst peacetime loss of life. It apologised for what it did or didn't do afterwards, but not for the crash itself. Today, that changed.
I apologise on behalf of an airline which 40 years ago failed in its duty of care to its passengers and staff. And I apologise again on behalf of the airline for the way in which the families of those lost on Mount Erebus were treated in the aftermath of the incident.
The speech from Dame Therese Walsh, the chair of Air New Zealand, came as a surprise today, as it wasn't in the rundown.
The year New Zealand of today is not the year New Zealand in 1979. The Prime Minister of today is not the Prime Minister of 1979. It's a significant event, a formal apology from the Prime Minister of New Zealand and also from the Chair of Air New Zealand. For my family, it's a weight off our shoulders.
Ms Ardern says the time was right for an apology, but after 40 years of family's frustration, she wasn't sure how they'd react.
I wasn't sure how necessarily it would be received. There's so much understandable grief, and it's hard for any of us to fathom what the past 40 years would have felt like for them. So to be honest, I did not know how an apology today would be received. All I knew was it was the right thing to do.
A memorial was also held at Scott Base today and Auckland Airport. However, a permanent public memorial in Auckland's Parnell is in limbo. It was meant to be finished by today for the anniversary, but ongoing delays over the last couple of years and now a stoush over its location is holding it up. Auckland Mayor Phil Goff spoke plainly about his views.
We hope that 40 years later we will finally have a memorial, a place where people can go to express their feelings and to remember. And I would certainly urge members of the local community and the local board to look favourably on the proposal that we have put forward.
I Tamaki Makoto, mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Jordan Bond, tēnei.
And if you were listening to that on the drive home, we will post that video piece on our Facebook page and web page if you want to go back and have a look at it. Fletcher Building is signalling a resolution over the Ihumātao land dispute is imminent, but won't be drawn on who it could sell the land to or for how much. Fletcher fronted several hundred of its shareholders today for its annual meeting, where it said the company had acted ethically, legally and sensitively in its development plans. The company's top bosses were grilled by shareholders about Ihumātao, but refused to give up much information, saying they were at the pointy end of negotiations. Nita Blake-Person reports.
A crowd of friendly protesters welcomed shareholders to the Fletcher Building AGM this morning, making sure the land dispute was high on the agenda. It's not the first year they've protested, but Pania Newton, a member of the Save Our Unique Landscape Group, or SOUL, is hopeful it will be the last.
We're thinking what a great Christmas present it would be to the whānau at Ihumātao and the community and New Zealand to protect and preserve it.
And that Christmas wish may just come true. Inside the meeting, the top Fletcher bosses signalled an end to negotiations over the land could be near.
We have acted both ethically, legally and sensitively during the development process. That aside, when the Prime Minister asked us to pause the development to allow discussions between government and iwi to take place, we agreed to do this. Our development has now been paused for almost 4 months because we want to support a mutually satisfactory outcome. Our discussions with government are continuing, and we have been advised that the government is hopeful of achieving a resolution by the end of the calendar year.
Chairman Bruce Hassel told the 300 or so shareholders packed into the meeting that Fletcher's had bought the land in good faith and followed due process. But shareholders still wanted answers. They levelled half a dozen or so questions at Mr Hassel and outgoing Chair Sir Ralph Norris.
I just hope that you could assure all the shareholders that Fletcher's will get an absolutely fair price that compensates for all the inconvenience, money tied up, etc.
The ball is currently in the hands of the Prime Minister, and we're asked to pause, and we're waiting, hopeful of a resolution soon. And a part of that resolution, we would expect Fletcher Building and you, the broader shareholders, to be fairly reflected on an equitable basis under any arrangement.
What was the expenditure on this cost of security? You've said not much. Is that more than $1 million or less than $1 million?
I can't comment on the level of police. That's their decision. Or people in jackets. A whole variety of people wear bright jackets.
Is it or is it not true that you spend $60,000 a month on security at Ihumātao?
I think I've made it pretty clear we're not commenting on specific matters, and picking up Ross's point, we're in discussions at the moment and that's what we're focused on. So we will not be answering those specific questions.
Fletcher is reportedly seeking $40 million for the property, more than double the $19 million it paid in 2014, but wouldn't confirm any figures today.
The reason I'm being a little bit opaque is we're in a set of negotiations, and the best interest of shareholders is for me to run those negotiations effectively, and if I start putting too much information in the public space, I mean, it just disadvantages shareholders, so it's quite deliberate.
Ihumātao is next to the Tuataua Stonefields Historic Reserve in Mangere. Mana Whenua and others have remained on site for 3 years to stop Fletchers from building 480 homes there. RNZ understands the government is considering lending money to Auckland Council so it can purchase the land from Fletchers. Pania Newton says she's in the dark about those discussions, but she doesn't want to see the building company profiting off the situation.
They should be compensated for, what they purchased the land for, but anything over and above that should be at their own cost, because they had full disclosure that, this sort of situation will arise out of their inept decision-making processes.
Fletcher shareholder Coralie Van Camp says she's not happy with how the company has behaved with the land dispute.
The zoning should never have been changed from a heritage category to intensive housing. It was wrong. Fletchers are not entirely innocent because there was a motivation to change the zoning, which put a very high value on the land. So I support the protesters.
She agrees Fletchers shouldn't be profiting off it.
I think if they're wise, they will cut their losses and run.
If the ball is in the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern's court, she wasn't giving anything away today, telling reporters she couldn't guarantee things would be sorted by Christmas.
I don't want to place arbitrary timelines on that. It is, I acknowledge, taking some time, but it is equally a very complex situation. As I say, we're all very focused on finding a way through.
For Checkpoint, Cornita Blakeperson, Aho.
Up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, we'll return to Samoa as the death toll from the measles outbreak rises to 39. A young man facing indecent assault charges after a young Labour summer camp is discharged without conviction. And how big is too big to play in a schoolboy rugby team? That's the question after an 11-year-old boy is sent packing from a rugby tournament. We would love to hear from you about anything you've heard on the programme so far this evening. We're hearing an outcome is imminent in the Ihumātao dispute. Let us know how you think that should be settled. Also, if you were at the Erebus apology today, we would love to hear from you and what that meant to you. Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time now for the headlines with Susanna.
The Prime Minister says today's Erebus apology is the first official recognition of Air New Zealand's culpability in the country's worst air disaster. The government and the airline have apologised unequivocally to the families of the 257 people who died in the crash at Mount Erebus in Antarctica 40 years ago today. Speaking on behalf of Air New Zealand, the chairperson, Dame Therese Walsh, said it had failed in its duty of care for the passengers and crew. Pilots say today's apologies are a game changer for the aviation industry. The president of the Airline Pilots Association says the 1979 crash and subsequent investigations had a lasting effect on their relationships with Air New Zealand. Andrew Ridling says the pilots on the aircraft that day were the subject of unfair conjecture and blame. Leaked documents show the New Zealand First Foundation, which loans money to the party, was set up to seek donors to a fund modelled on the National Party's National Foundation, with benefits for each tier of donation. The Electoral Commission is currently looking into the New Zealand First Foundation and party after questions were raised about compliance with electoral law. The Court of Appeal has for the second time rejected an appeal by a self-professed white supremacist against his sentence. Philip Arps was jailed for 21 months in June for distributing the live-streamed video of the March 15th Christchurch Mosque massacre. Paying for extra teachers was one reason for 36 schools having to be bailed out by the Education Ministry last year. The Auditor-General says they spent more than 80% of their operations grant on teachers, well above the norm. It says 68 schools broke the law in 2018, two-thirds of them by exceeding their borrowing limits, and warns more are at risk of overspending. A person has died after falling from an overbridge onto the motorway in Auckland. The police are at the incident at the Hobsonville Road overbridge on the northwestern motorway. A section of motorway on State Highway 16 is closed between Hobsonville off-ramp and Royal Road on-ramp. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just tuning in, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen, and you've come across us at, probably the right time, Madison? Madison Reedy is here to talk to us about business news today. So Sky, this is interesting. They have cut a deal with TVNZ for the Olympic Games coverage. Why are they teaming up and how's it going to work?
Yeah, so this is a bit of a surprise, this one. Now, both of the companies say that it's a win-win for them both. Previously, Sky Network Television, which is a listed company, has aired previous Olympic Games like the Rio Games in 2016 on their own free-to-air channel Prime. But this time they've changed things up and they've actually sub-licensed their exclusive broadcast rights for the Olympics and given the free-to-air part of those rights to TVNZ. Now, we don't know how much TVNZ has paid for it. The sum is undisclosed. But Sky does say that it will benefit them, not just because they obviously get a bit of money from it, but also because it will expand their audience. In 2016, they garnered 2.8 million viewers. That will obviously expand with TVNZ's one channel garnering a lot of viewers too. And also, on the flip side of that, TVNZ will get 12 hours a day over the course of the Olympic Games in mid-next year to air whatever events they like. They say that it's going to be the key events. Now, I did ask Sky's Chief Executive Martin Stewart today if this sort of deal would, in a way, cut its lunch, because why would people pay for a subscription on Sky TV, let alone buy a subscription to its sports streaming service, Sky Sport Now, if they can get most of what they want to watch with the Olympics free on TVNZ. But he says that he doesn't quite see it like that. He says that the media market is changing and as a result, consumers want options. He says that people will pay, he thinks, for highlights, reels, the in-depth analysis and the stories behind athletes as well on Sky's channels.
So that 12 hours of coverage, they can play it out live?
Yeah, they can play it out live and they can also play it out live on TVNZ On Demand too.
Interesting. Okay, so you've also got the latest read on business confidence. It's out and what's the news?
Well, it's slightly more positive, or one could also say it's just less bad news this time around. Now, the headline business confidence number, that jumped up 16 points in the month of November. So now a net 26% of business respondents think that the economy will worsen. That's down from 42% last month in October. Now, all of the underlying economic indicators rose too. So firms' expectations for their own activity, that rose 17 points, and that's actually often seen as the better economic read there too. Now, both the headline and that better economic read are actually both at their strongest level in an entire year. Now, as a result of this more optimistic business confidence result, economists at ASB have actually changed up their official cash rate forecasts. They say that they are now no longer expecting a cut in February. They're now expecting only one more 25 basis point cut to the wholesale rate in May next year.
Okay, let's take a quick canter around the markets then.
The NZX Top 50 index, that closed up 0.8% tonight. So that's a rise of 86 points to close at 11,207. Big numbers there. The New Zealand dollar, that's buying at 64.2 US cents, just under 95 to the Aussie and 49.7 British pence.
Thanks, Madison. Madison Reedy there with business news. Speed limits around the country's schools will be reduced to make streets safer for students, with more speed cameras planned to enforce the change. Associate Minister of Transport Julian Genta says the law changes will come into force next year, but it could take up to a decade to implement nationwide. The reduced speed limits are part of wider changes that will see the New Zealand Transport Agency take over speed cameras, which are now operated by the police. Amy Williams has more.
Speed limits outside urban schools will reduce to a maximum 40 kilometres per hour, and for rural schools the maximum will be 60 kilometres per hour. Owaraka District School is on a busy arterial road, and children are rostered for road patrol at the pedestrian crossing just outside the school gates.
I think that it would make it easier for us to put the signs out and people to cross. It depends on what side of the road I am, because if they're coming from the higher part of the hill, then they're going faster.
I realised that lots of the cars drive really fast and it's unsafe for people crossing the road, so if we drop the speed limit, it's better.
The school's principal, Cheryl Fletcher, says they've reduced the speed limit near the school to 40 kilometres as part of a pilot program with Auckland Transport. Ms Fletcher estimates only a third of kids are walking to the school, which is on a busy main road.
It's a busy road, it's an arterial road. The 40 k's absolutely makes a difference, but I'm not 100% sure that we've got full compliance there. Anything that is safer for kids, so slower cars mean safer kids.
Associate Minister of Transport, Julianne Genter, says the reduced speed limits around schools will be made law by the middle of next year. It'll then be up to schools to work with their local council to decide what streets and times the reduced speed limits will apply and how low to go.
The rule changes and legislative changes will be done by the middle of 2020, and then we'll expect the changes to be rolled out progressively over the next 3 to 10 years.
Ms Genter says reducing the speed limit around schools is part of wider changes planned that include giving the New Zealand Transport Agency control of speed cameras and placing more cameras around schools. She says the speed cameras will be well signposted and any changes to fines will be decided next year.
Over time, we'd expect there to be more speed cameras, but they'll be very well signposted, so it will be really hard to accidentally get an infringement.
Ms Genter announced the changes at Owaraka District School this morning during school drop-off. Parent Jane Coolin walks a dozen kids to school on a walking school bus.
What's New Zealand come to that we don't look out for our kids, you know? We know they're not developed. We shouldn't need a law that says slow down, look after your kids. It should be built into our psyche. I mean, we're quite a caring country. I can't believe that we need that law anyway.
Road safety campaigners Break and Living Streets Aotearoa both say they'd like speed limits around schools to be lower than 40 kilometres per hour. They'd like 30 kilometre speed limits in place with safe crossings and footpaths. For Checkpoint, Amy Williams.
It is about 20 minutes away from 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We're keen for your feedback on anything you've heard on the show so far this evening. What do you think about those speed limits going down? You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. A man who murdered his ex-girlfriend and her young daughter and hid their bodies under a bridge in Auckland is appealing his prison sentence. Kamal Reedy killed Pakisa Yusuf in late 2006 by strangling her with an iron cord and used a pillow to kill her daughter Jojo. Reddy was sentenced to life in prison in 2016 but is challenging that in the Court of Appeal. Jonathan Mitchell reports.
The bodies of Pakisa Yusuf and her daughter Jojo were only discovered under a bridge on the North Shore in 2014 after Reddy confessed to undercover officers during a Mr. Big police investigation. Reddy maintained his innocence during his trial, claiming the confessions were false to cover for Ms. Yusuf's new boyfriend. He did accept he helped the killer get rid of the bodies. The jury didn't believe him and he was convicted of murder. Reddy was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum non-parole period of 21 years in 2016. Today, Reddy appeared by video link in the Court of Appeal to appeal that sentence. He listened and took notes throughout the 3-hour proceeding from a simple white concrete block cell in prison. His lawyer, Paul Dacre QC, acknowledged Reddy knew where the bodies were and gave a lot of detail to undercover police.
The evidence does point to the fact he knows where the body was buried. One can't get away from that fact. It's arguable whether the evidence does support or corroborate the details.
He says if that omission wasn't on the table, the Crown had little else to go on.
There is no corroboration to that admission. And so that's why my submission to the court is there should have been a direction about that.
However, acting for the Crown, Mark Lillico told the court a confession was enough.
Consistency also lies in the fact that Mr Reddy told the undercover police that there would be a layer of rocks and stones on top of the bodies, and that he was able to lay out the bodies without folding them or bending them. In Ms Yusuf's body, the adult skeleton was found in a lying position. So it's not just the fact of the location, it's the way they were buried.
He says there was also evidence of Reddy covering his tracks.
He explained to the undercover officers, the references are there, that he had to have time to clear out her flat, and that's where the use of paying the rent, paying the Sky account, etc. came in. He is intercepted on the 18th of September 2013 in a bit of a panic about the couch, because he's been shown a photo of the couch by the officer in charge, and he then resolves to get rid of it, covering his tracks.
The Court of Appeal has reserved its decision. For Checkpoint, Court Jonathan Mitchell, Tēnei.
A Waikato gang has come out strongly against proposed changes to gun laws, calling them racist, undemocratic and poorly thought out. In what was a first, the Waikato mongrel mob kingdom has made a submission to a parliamentary select committee. If passed, the revised Arms Act would, among other things, introduce a firearms register to monitor and track every firearm legally held in New Zealand. It would also give the police the power to keep those they deem high risk away from guns. Waikato mongrel mob kingdom spokesperson Louise Hutchinson says the proposed law is a knee-jerk reaction to a problem that should have been addressed many years ago.
We believe the arms legislation bill has been written in haste, and we do not believe that the content of the legislation enacted in its current state will make Aotearoa a safer place. The Waikato mongrel mob kingdom is concerned that there is a rush to change firearms legislation and the need to be seen as doing something without due consultation. It is a shortcutting of New Zealand's democratic process which will indirectly put our immediate whānau and our whānau outside of the Waikato region at a higher risk than any other New Zealand community because of poorly written, poorly thought out legislation which will have mistakes, errors and omissions. Many Māori do not understand the content of this legislation and they will continue to be a stick to beat, which essentially will see Māori being the prime targets, particularly our gang communities, of this legislation, albeit to say this legislation is racist in its intent.
Louise Hutchinson says the proposed legislation is a distraction from the real issue.
The period after a mass shooting is often very telling. When the shooter is white, the context is the individual narrative, this individual disordered white mind. When the shooter is brown, all of a sudden the disorder is culture. The narrative we tell then is about terrorism or gangs. People say that if we get rid of guns, mass shootings will decrease. But guns aren't the problem, people are the problem. Guns don't kill, it's people that kill people. It is our contention that the targeted focus of this bill has turned from the white single disaffected perpetrator of the Christchurch massacre to the non-white community. We would also like to highlight that of all historical shooting massacres in New Zealand, all but one has been white perpetrators. Of the approximately 17 police officers shot dead in the line of duty, the majority of them were killed by white offenders. And in fact, within the Waikato region, the greater percentage of prosecutions related to firearms offences fell on the shoulders of white offenders.
Louise Hutchinson, the spokesperson for Waikato mongrel mob kingdom, speaking to Parliament's Finance and Expenditure Select Committee in Hamilton today. The young man who put his hand down the pants of two teenagers at a young Labour summer camp has been discharged without conviction. The 21-year-old stood trial in September after pleading not guilty to 5 charges of indecent assault in relation to 4 teenagers, 2 young men and 2 young women. But in a surprise move, he pleaded guilty 3 days into the trial to 2 amended charges of common assault. Katie Scotcher was at his sentencing.
Allegations of assaults at a young Labour summer camp generated a political storm and intense media coverage when they broke in March last year. That media scrutiny was evident in court this morning. The press contingent outnumbered the lawyers, court staff and people sitting in the public gallery. One of the victims, who was 18 at the time of the summer camp, was there. Judge Russell Collins spoke to him directly.
If there's one wish that all judges could be granted that we'd ask for, it's totally unrealistic. We'll be able to put victims back into the position they were in their lives prior to the offending. And nothing that I'll say or do today diminishes the impact that this has had on you.
The victim was one of about 50 young people to attend the summer camp in Waihi last February. The 3-day event was organised by the youth wing of the Labour Party, and the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern spoke at its opening on February 9th. On the night of Saturday, February 10th, a group of people got drunk after a quiz.
From the evidence that I heard and saw, it was evident that a lot of alcohol was consumed.
Judge Collins told the court people started to dance to music after the quiz.
At some point, Mr. was walking past one of the victims, and as he did so, he put his hand down that victim's pants, inside his underwear, grabbing his penis and testicles for around a second.
Judge Collins said the victim pulled away in shock. Later that night, a group of people gathered to take a photo in front of a sign displaying the Labour Party's campaign slogan, "Let's do this." It was then, Judge Collins said, the man put his hand out and put it down the second victim's pants on top of his underwear.
The victim pushed Mr. hand away. A short time later, Mr. again reached out and put his hand inside the front of the victim's pants towards his genital, but not as so far as to reach his genitals. Again, the victim pushed his hand away.
Judge Collins said the young man apologised to the second victim, who was 16 at the time, for touching him the next morning, and apologised to the first victim later that day. He said the gravity of the young man's offending was low and wasn't for any sexual gratification.
Yes, it was highly offensive and would have been particularly so to the two victims. However, it was born out of drunken stupidity. That doesn't excuse it, and as a matter of law, his drunkenness isn't a mitigating factor.
Judge Collins said apart from his behaviour on the night of the offending, the 21-year-old is impressive and has succeeded well in life. He discharged the young man without conviction. He also declined to give the man permanent name suppression. His lawyer, Emma Priest, earlier argued her client would face a lifetime of Google searches if identified.
The highly political nature of the prosecution in my submission will mean that this case will continue to be linked to other political news for political reasons, and that's already been evident in respect of subsequent sexual allegations within the Labour Party.
However, the young man's name will remain unreported for now, as Ms Priest indicated she would challenge that decision. When asked by reporters about the sentencing, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said she planned to meet with the victims and that work was underway to ensure the Labour Party is a safe place for young people. I tamaki makaurau mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Katie Scott Churahau.
Work to complete the fire-damaged International Convention Centre in central Auckland is expected to begin again in February. Fletcher Building told shareholders at this morning's annual meeting that insurance will cover the damage. Access to the construction site is still restricted as safety and structural assessments and investigations into the cause of the fire are still ongoing. The Chief Executive of Fletcher Building, Ross Taylor, spoke with business reporter Nona Peltier about what happens next.
Yeah, the steps to get back on site and get going again, it is getting the building safe, but you've got to imagine what's there after the roof effectively burned off and debris falls down. You've got to, some bits are still hanging up there, some bits, you've got to work out what steel was affected, was the facade affected, what's safe, what's not safe. So there's quite a piece of work just understanding what's structurally sound and what's not. And then when you know what's not going to fall over, you then got to work out, is it still fit for purpose to carry the loads it was designed to. So, and then you've got the water damage you've got to work through. So it's not just where the fire was up the top, it's as all the water was poured onto the building, it's gone through plant rooms and all that, and then down the bottom it actually puddles until you can pump it out, and there's mould issues. So there's quite a bit of work beyond what you just might say, just go in, scrape a few things out. So that will take time. And we've alluded to the fact that we've got to work through that this side of Christmas at the same time as we're planning the rebuild. And I think it'll be sort of February when we bring all that together.
And so at that point you'll have an idea of where you're at, but that certainly won't be at a point where you're going to say, okay, we're going to start reconstructing now.
Oh no, we want to be ready to start doing that in February, yes.
So just a few more months.
Yeah, so February next year, we should be in a place, and it might not mean you're starting everything, but you should be through understand it, make it safe, scope it, and getting going again.
What about the outlook for the Building and Interiors division? You were kind of hoping to get all those legacy projects behind you by sort of 2020, end of 2020. Where are you at with that now in terms of the Commercial Bay development, which is underway, as well as the International Convention Centre and Horizon Hotel? So
nothing's really changed apart from the convention centre. Obviously the rest will remain on their programs, and we'll be through them through 2020. Obviously the rebuild of the convention centre will add to that, and as I said, that's when we'll update the market and our shareholders in February, when we've sort of put some definition around that.
And that was the Chief Executive of Fletcher Building, Ross Taylor, talking to business reporter Nona Peltier. It's about as Kiwi as Jandals and Pavlova, summer days with kids sliding belly first through piles of mud at the Uranui Flats in Taranaki. Not this year though, unless you're prepared to risk a mouthful of mud laced with human poo. A local school conservation project discovered there was possible contamination on the mud flats, and further testing uncovered high levels of E. coli in the stormwater that flows into the Uranui River. Marlene Benson of Ngāti Mutanga says it's been a bit of a shock, and it's a disappointment for the kids.
One of the last tests we did, and it's quite expensive, was to test whether there was any E. coli going out the stormwater drains into the estuary from the Uranui township, and there was. So then we sent it away to be tested again to see if it was human, and it's quite complicated and quite an expensive test. But anyway, it came back with quite strong results that there was human sewage going out into the estuary through the stormwater, which should never happen because those, stormwater and wastewater shouldn't be connected.
To put it bluntly, Marlene, where do we think the human poo is coming from?
Well, Uranui's on septic tanks, and it's quite a big community, and also the numbers go up and down sort of in summer and the rest of the year. So it could be a problem of people not maintaining their septic tanks. Could be their problem that they don't realise how you look after a septic tank, or it could be that somewhere over the last 100 or so years, someone's connected sort of the grey water or septic tank outflow straight into the stormwater, and the person living there might not even know about it.
So paint us a picture. How popular is this area normally, and what do the kids get up to there?
When you talk to people who don't know, because it's actually the mud flats which is on the town side of the Uranui River. Most people go swimming on the beach side, the beach camp side, but the problem is, since, and I used to do it when I was a kid, which was quite a long time ago, it's so popular. You swim across the river and you just slide around on the mud all day. It's actually the mud flats, which is the area that's directly affected by the sewage, and it's the mud flats where you shouldn't be eating anything off, and you shouldn't even be touching the mud.
So, Marlene,
is it going to be a problem?
Is it normally puku first down the mud flats?
Yeah.
Through all this, through all the sludge. You said you'd done it.
Yeah, when I was a kid, we used to do it all the time. It's sort of, it's not a lot. That's sort of the main entertainment, really.
Well, go back into your memory banks, Marlene. What was it like? Tell us about it.
It just felt lots of fun, just sliding around on that mud. It sort of, was cool. It was,
And did you fire down there in your togs, Marlene, or what?
Yes, because you swim across the river. It's sort of on the town side of where everyone gets into the river,
So, is that off the cards this summer, totally?
Yeah, I should say so, unless we find a really quick fix. The NPDC, New Zealand District Council's I went out with them this morning, they've been trying to isolate where exactly within the stormwater system the contamination's happening. Now, if it is just someone connected wrongly or their septic tank needs, maintenance or cleaning or whatever, then that's probably quite a quick fix. If it's that it's a really old septic tank, then it will need replacing, or we need to think about, is septic tank's the right way to handle the sewage in Uranui now the population's increasing.
So
that's sort of a longer term problem.
A few disappointed kids in the neighbourhood then, eh?
Yeah. We've been trying to work out what to do, whether we sit there yelling at them or whether we bribe them with ice creams or a sausage sizzle to stay off the mud. But yeah, if anyone's got any suggestions, we would really like to hear them.
So Marlene, if I'm in your area over the summer, and where else would you recommend I go if I can't put on my swimmers and go belly first down the mud flats? What's the next best thing?
Well, you can go swimming in the sea off the front of Uranui, or you can go up to Waiheke and go swimming there. Yep, there's heaps of other places to go swimming.
Marlene says that the new Plymouth District Council is doing more testing to work out exactly where the contamination is coming from and how to stem the flow. And Susanna, well, she volunteers to give it a crack once they clear it up, so we should look forward to that. I also recommend Rere Falls near Gisborne, if that's not an option, the mudslide. On a more sombre note, measles. This person has said something has been puzzling me about whether or not the Samoan government started vaccinating people when measles were spreading amongst the Samoan population in New Zealand. Given that many people travel between the two countries, this would surely have been a good idea. In relation, we'll keep this one for after 6.
RNZ News at 6, ngā mihi nui, ko Susana Leata with DNA. The son of a man killed on the Mount Erebus flight is relieved after an unreserved apology from the government and Air New Zealand. Jacinda Ardern and the chair of Air New Zealand's board, Dame Therese Walsh, today for the first time unequivocally apologised for failures leading up to the 1979 flight, which killed 257 people, and their actions afterwards. Dan Maloney's father, Nick, was a flight engineer on the plane. He wasn't expecting an apology and said that made an already special day that much more memorable.
It was special. I just about had tears in my eyes when they started talking about an apology. You know, it was emotional. It's sort of spiritual. It was incredible. So thank you, Jacinda, and thank you to the chair of Air New Zealand.
Dan Maloney. Airline pilots are calling today's apologies for the Erebus disaster a game changer for the aviation industry. The president of the Airline Pilots Association, Andrew Ridling, says the crash and the investigations that followed had a lasting effect on relationships with Air New Zealand. He says the pilots on board the aircraft that day were the subject of unfair conjecture and blame that affected their reputations. Mr. Ridling says the association has waited a very long time to see that put right. Scientists, former police officers and Antarctica New Zealand staff gathered at Scott Base today to commemorate the 40th anniversary of the Erebus crash. Katie Todd reports.
A small ceremony was held at the memorial site Koru at 11 minutes to 1 this afternoon. Antarctica New Zealand's chief, Sarah Williamson, says the Erebus tragedy touched the lives of all New Zealanders. Among those at the ceremony today were 2 retired police officers, Stuart Layton and Brett Jones, who were involved in the recovery operation after the crash. There's a small ceremony each year at Scott Base to remember it, but Ms Williamson says having Stu and Brett in Antarctica this year has been extremely special. Ko Katie Todd, TNA.
Leaked documents show the secretive foundation that loans money to New Zealand First was set up to seek donors for the party with benefits for each tier of donation. The Electoral Commission is currently looking into the New Zealand First Foundation and party after questions were raised about compliance with the requirements for donations and loans. Guy Spinner reports.
The documents contain a proposal to set up a fund modelled on the National Party's National Foundation, saying New Zealand First had been unsuccessful at raising money. The proposal recommended creating a tiered donation structure with benefits for each tier. The documents show Winston Peters was at a March 2017 board meeting where the proposal was agreed to, and by May that year the foundation had been established. The proposal recommended asking Mr Peters to choose a legal advisor to set up the foundation. Earlier this month, Mr Peters told reporters he looked after the political wing of the party and the foundation was an administrative matter. Ko Guy Espina, TNA.
There have been 6 more deaths in Samoa's measles epidemic, bringing the total to 39. All but 4 of the deaths were children under the age of 4, including the 6 who died in the past 24 hours. RNZ Pacific's Mackenzie Smith reports.
Since October, measles in Samoa has spread like wildfire. In the span of 2 weeks, the death count has risen from 6 to 39. 190 people with the disease remain in hospital, including 25 critically ill children and pregnant women. A mass vaccination campaign is underway, and dozens of New Zealand and Australian nurses and doctors are in Samoa to assist. Samoa's top health official warns the worst is yet to come. This is Mackenzie Smith.
The head of Whenua Grey Power says there's a high level of fear, sadness and anger following the death of an elderly woman yesterday. The 90-year-old was attacked inside her home in Levin earlier this month. Grey Power's Terry Hemmingson says the death has had a big impact on elderly people who live in the area.
A great deal of sadness, a high level of anger as well from people who knew her or knew of her, and a high level of fearfulness. I've had phone calls today from quite a number of people who have said that with her passing they're really quite fearful of where they live and how they live.
Terry Hemmingson. 3 young women who were arrested in relation to the attack are still before the courts. Learning he's set to make his Test cricket debut hasn't fazed all-rounder Daryl Mitchell, says veteran Black Caps batsman Ross Taylor. Mitchell, the son of former All Blacks coach John Mitchell, will replace the injured Colin de Grandhomme in the Black Caps side for tomorrow's second Test against England in Hamilton. Pace bowler Trent Boult will also miss the match with a rib injury, but it remains to be seen whether Matt Henry or uncapped fast bowler Lockie Ferguson will replace him. Taylor says Mitchell's experience in 2020 games for New Zealand will help him tomorrow.
I think he's pretty level-headed. He hasn't shown much emotion. I think sometimes when you play your first game for New Zealand, regardless of the format, you're pretty nervous. But I'm sure he will be nervous tomorrow. But I'm sure that 2020 experience will give him something to fall back on.
Ross Taylor. It's 6:05. New Zealand cyclists will take to the velodrome for the first time in the World Cup competition in Hong Kong tonight. New Zealand hasn't competed in the previous 2 rounds, meaning the likes of the 3-time world champion men's team sprint trio of Ethan Mitchell, Sam Webster and Eddie Dawkins need a strong start to their season to earn valuable ranking points. With the Europeans already with 2 World Cups under their belt, it means New Zealand are currently 9th in the Olympic rankings. The Tall Blacks have been drawn alongside hosts Serbia and Dominican Republic in one of the final Olympic basketball qualifying tournaments in June. Just the winner of the tournament qualifies for Tokyo, with 6th ranked Serbia the favourites to progress. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, a window on the world of bakeries. Brad Warrington, aka DJ Sticky Fingers, continues the story of Kiwi hip-hop. Our Anglo-Indian correspondent Sharon Dhaliwal is on the line from London, and Alison Balance delves deeper into the prehistory of our lakes and the stories to be found in the sediment they've left behind. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight. Tomorrow, Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula. Fine spells, scattered showers developing tonight, some possibly heavy tomorrow afternoon and tomorrow night. Waikato to Manawatu, including Bay of Plenty, Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Central High Country. Fine spells, scattered showers mainly inland, some heavy with possible thunderstorms. Horowhenua to Wellington, including Wairirapa, cloudy periods. Nelson and Buller, fine spells, isolated showers inland. Marlborough and Canterbury, fine tonight, becoming cloudy tomorrow with scattered showers. Westland, showers spreading north, retreating inland tomorrow morning and clearing by tomorrow night. Fiordland, rain clearing overnight. Otago and Southland, fine spells, a few showers tonight, possibly thundery about inland Clutha, Dunedin and North Otago. Cloudy areas tomorrow with isolated showers in Otago. Chatham Islands, low cloud showers developing tomorrow evening. RNZ National, it's coming up to 6:08.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Let's return now to Samoa, where the death toll from the measles epidemic has risen to 39 following the deaths of 6 young children overnight. For the third day in a row now, the number of deaths has continued to rise as the government races against time to vaccinate the entire population. Our reporter Alex Perrottet and multimedia journalist Logan Church arrived in Samoa late this afternoon, and Alex joins me now. Alex, what's happening there?
Well, we're just outside the Tupua Tamasese Meaole Hospital in Apia, that's Samoa's capital, as the sun's gone down. Nice evening breeze, although they did say it was a hotter day than usual. It was a little bit eerie outside the hospital, rather quiet, and I don't think it's an exaggeration to use the word fear. We saw a number of families in their cars, one couple with an infant on their lap and 2 young kids in the back of the car, all with face masks on, looking very concerned, talking to authorities. Not too sure whether they were admitted here at the hospital. But certainly there is concern and there is fear because this death toll is rising. As you said, 6 overnight. We're at 39 deaths from measles in Samoa and almost 3,000 cases. Again, that critical age group, 1 to 4 years old, there are over 900 kids in that age group that have measles, so we're going to watch the numbers and we're going to hope and pray that the deaths don't continue to rise. We're here outside the Ministry of Health actually, and we wombled in and happened upon the CEO of the Ministry, the Director of Health, that's Lea Usa, Dr. Takena Seri. He was just alone at his desk. We'll be talking to him at more length tomorrow, but he did look tired, and he did say that the nurses and the doctors are tired. They're expecting more to come in from overseas, including New Zealand.
So what more can you tell us about the vaccination program and whether it's working for the target age that they're trying to reach?
That's right. Well, here at the hospital, Lisa, this is kind of the main centre where people are coming in to get immunisations. As you can understand, it's the capital here. But the concern for children are right around the country in the villages. And so there are mobile units. We've talked to the person that's coordinating that. So there are 18 mobile units that go out every day. They're actually just waiting for the last of them to come in at the moment. And they're going to regroup at 7:30 in the morning and send them all out again. There's 5 in each team. That's 2 vaccinators, a data person, someone who's recording everyone who's getting the jab, as well as a police officer there for security and a driver. So they're going out in 18 different vans. That's 90 people around the country. They're the mobile units taking those immunisations around the country. Really, really important because, as we said, 900 people aged 1 to 4 have this disease, and that is the category of the lowest uptake of vaccinations. The fear I was talking about before comes from the scare last year where 2 children died after human error, where 2 nurses mixed the wrong vials and those children died. That sent vaccination rates plummeting. They were already low. The effort now is to try to convince them to instead not be afraid of the jab, but be afraid of what's happening if you don't get it, which is deaths, 39 and counting. Lisa, this is already a tragedy. Just how much a tragedy it's going to be will be seen in the next days and weeks.
That's Alex Perrottet, our reporter on the ground in Apia. He's there with our multimedia journalist Logan Church, and they will be reporting from Samoa on that measles epidemic over the next few days. Protesters at a public hui today in Auckland cursed mana whenua of the ancestral Mauna o Wairaka Mount Albert, telling them they were colonisers and questioning their whakapapa. The hui was called by Tupuna Mauna Authority and was for the public to air their concerns about the restoration project on the mountain. A small group of protesters, honour the Mauna, who were against the felling of 345 trees, refused to attend, with only some members going individually. Mani Donop was there.
Kurungapo led a karakia that was used by his ancestors in that area to whakawātia or clear the way for the rōpū making their way up the maunga. But he says its message was lost on many in the protest group.
I just don't think that they really understand what they were actually engaging in. And I think a lot of people were actually really offended by what they actually said. So, I mean, it is what it is. It's up to the Tupuna Maunga Authority to do what they need to do, but certainly from a cultural view, in terms of karakia and taku and so forth, we did what we had to do to try and keep everybody safe.
The majority of the protest group stayed by the entrance and did not attend the hui, which was near the summit of the maunga. A spokesperson, Anna Radford, says she doesn't believe the Maunga Authority want to meet them halfway.
So we've decided not to attend the hui because we believe that there's no integrity in the process and no willingness to engage in an open way with us. And so we've decided that we'll just stand here. We're not blocking the hui in any way.
However, she says some individuals did attend and made their views known. Protester Lisa Prager told mana whenua that she herself was mana whenua, despite being Pākehā and having no whakapapa connection to the whenua. Her partner of Samoan descent used a karanga to curse the mana whenua and their mokopuna for approving the project. She got a hostile reception, with a representative from the Independent Māori Statutory Board, Tau Hinare, saying he felt he was being colonised twice over. He called the protesters a group of woke and entitled Pākehā.
What's the difference between Ihumātao and here? I'll tell you what it is. These people own this place. They have the authority, not you. They have the authority, not you. You can speak to as many trees as you want to. It's not about that. It ain't about the bird life. No, it ain't. It's about them. It's about the authority.
Arborist and lecturer Zane Wedding spoke in support of the project. He says it is about more than just planting trees.
So to give them precedence on this maunga, how much mana does that give back to my people? Now, I'm a Māori that did not grow up with tikanga Māori. I did not grow up in te ao Māori, so this is like bringing me to that culture. It fills me with mana.
The Tupuna Maunga Authority Chair, Paul Najuri, says there's still no decision on when the tree felling will start.
We have tried to accommodate what they sought from us in terms of a meeting. It seems there were a few of their folk here today, but certainly the great majority weren't. So we need to take stock. Where are they sitting? How do they see it? Are they looking to absolutely say that regardless of what's spoken about and what we discuss, that they're going to try and stop us? We don't know. We'll have to see where we get to with that.
And Korongapo had one message for the protesters.
To educate themselves around co-governance and not to be threatened by it. Because, yeah, I understood what everyone was saying today. We all have a connection to all our maunga right through Aotearoa. But I think one group has used this type of issue to, to put their views across. And I don't necessarily think that, they're listening.
Meanwhile, the protesters say they will continue to occupy the land until they know the non-native trees on the maunga will not be cut down. In Tāmaki Makoto, ko Mani Dunlop tēnei.
It is almost 16 after 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A woman was sentenced in the Christchurch District Court today following the largest synthetic cannabis bust in New Zealand. 48-year-old Faye He ran a $4 million synthetic cannabis operation out of a Christchurch dairy and was sentenced to 2 years and 4 months in prison today, having earlier pleaded guilty. During sentencing, Judge Stephen O'Driscoll said the 173 kilograms of synthetic cannabis that was seized by the police was the largest ever found in a police operation. Our Christchurch reporter Nicholas Poynton was in court today. I asked him how the case unfolded.
Yesterday we heard from the Crown, and today was He's opportunity to tell her side of the story through the use of a Mandarin translator. She waived the right to use a lawyer despite the judge's recommendation, and she tried to retract her earlier guilty plea. As she came in, she was wearing a silver sort of satin jumpsuit with some words on the back which said Operation Sin, Protect Our Lives. That was a reference to the police's operation into the drug ring that they say she was orchestrating. The judge asked her to, respond to the Crown submissions and the pre-sentence report, and he said that the only thing that they had got right was her name and her date of birth. She then proceeded to say that the Crown's case against her was completely fabricated by the police, that the information that they had built was, they said that they had extorted her, that the police had actually given her these products to sell on behalf of them, and they forced her to pay a protection fee to cover her while she was organising this drug ring. He said that she had no knowledge and had never met the other two defendants before, She also said that the products that were being sold was a Chinese herbal medicine.
Well, that obviously is an interesting story on her part. So what was the judge's response to it?
Well, the judge dismissed all of his claims, saying that she had no evidence to back up what she was saying, and by denying that the circumstances of the case, it was just her way to try and save face. He said he was the principal ringleader in the case and that she was involved in an effort to make easy money by preying on people who were vulnerable. The claim that she was selling Chinese herbal medicine he rejected because he said most people who are selling Chinese herbal medicine do not try and hide the fact they are doing so, nor do they sell Chinese herbal medicine in car parks or other clandestine meetings. He also made a point that people who sell Chinese herbal medicine do not do so armed with guns.
Yeah, so just on that point, she was claiming, was she, that this was, well, it was a herbal medicine, some kind of traditional remedy? Was that what she was saying?
Yes, that's what she was saying. That's what she told the court yesterday and today, that it was a herbal medicine that she had imported from China. It's incredibly popular, especially for a lot of the Chinese community that's living here in New Zealand. But that claim was refuted by the Crown.
And while she claims that she doesn't know any of these other people, there was this evidence that they were back and forth communicating with each other?
That is correct, yes. There was extensive text messages using the messaging app WeChat between all three of the parties.
And so when the sentence was handed down, this 2 years, 4 months in prison, how did she react?
Well, he didn't say anything. She silently accepted the verdict and moved through into another room afterwards. Throughout the crowd, and there were many supporters for he throughout today's proceedings. They remained quiet throughout and said nothing as the sentence was passed down.
And that was our reporter Nicholas Poynton, who was in court today for that sentencing in that synthetic cannabis case. An 11-year-old Australian boy of Cook Island Māori descent has been left in tears after he was described as the big kid and ordered off the field in the middle of a junior rugby tournament in Sydney this month. Leo Farr's mum is furious. She's now calling for better communication from the Sydney Junior Rugby Union in an attempt to stop this happening to other children in the future. Tale Anderson reports.
3 weeks into an 8-week tournament, Leo Aotearoa Tuaine Korewha was singled out in front of his teammates and more than 100 spectators when officials ordered him off the field because he was too big for his age grade. Leo's mum, Ayla Hinekitiao, who posted a video of the incident on Facebook, says she is disgusted at how the situation was handled, especially as it involved children.
To be told that you can't play in your own age group because you're pretty much too big is disgusting. You know, what about those who are wanting to go and play with their mates and that want to play in their own age group? I think that needs to be brought up and brought to light within the clubs and within rugby itself. But I really hope it doesn't happen to any other kid out there because it is traumatising.
Prior to the tournament, Leo's ability to play in the under 11 and under 12 grades for his school was reassessed after a complaint from another parent. Leo, who is 1.74 metres tall and weighs 86 kilos, was cleared to play, but after the school holidays, his mum insisted that he undergo another assessment to prevent any sideline issues. Recommendations were then made that he play a grade higher, but because he was already playing under 12s at school, there was no requirement for him to be assessed. However, a dispensation was sent to the Sydney Junior Rugby Union for their records. Leo has played rugby league since he was 4, but has only been playing rugby for 3 years, and Miss Hinekitiao says she was not aware that he could not play in an under 11 team. She says the dispensation was done purely for representative trials at his school, and if there were any issues with him playing in the same grades for his club, they should have notified him much earlier. After a video of Leo getting sent off the field was posted to Facebook, Leo and his family have been inundated with support from around the world, but all his mother wants is an apology and an explanation from the New South Wales Rugby Union.
There was no apology. He's just gone and said, okay, let's talk about the media side of things. Are you willing to, I guess, take it down and we can sort this matter out? But then also asked me, well, if you're willing to take the post down, as soon as he said that to me, I'm like, well, hang on a moment. Do you really care about Leo's welfare here? Or are you trying to maybe, cover yourself up for something?
In a joint statement, the two rugby unions said they were aware of the matter and would be working with the parents and clubs to ensure there was a place for Leo to stay involved in the game.
While it's not NSWRU or SJRU's intention to prevent any player from participating in rugby, the player involved had been previously assessed in accordance with the policy, and it was deemed he was required to compete in an older age division. Despite several attempts to get in contact with all those involved, the matter was then required to be addressed at the competition in person. We recognise that perhaps further attempts could have been taken to speak to all those involved to minimise the impact to the player, his teammates and the wider competition.
Since then, Leo has continued to support his team from the competition sidelines, but whether he continues to play rugby in the future is still up in the air. For Checkpoint, this is Tali Anderson.
The daughter of a flight engineer killed in the Erebus crash says the apology today has lifted a weight she's been shouldering since she was a schoolgirl, worrying her dad may have done something to cause the accident. Virginia Brooks' father, Gordon Brooks, was an Air New Zealand engineer on board Flight 901 40 years ago. Today, the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, issued a wholehearted and wide-reaching apology on behalf of the airline and government for both failures that led to the crash and the way things were handled in the aftermath. Neither had made a full apology before this. Virginia Brooks says to be there today to hear both Air New Zealand and the Prime Minister say sorry was just amazing.
They were enormous. To be honest, it's lifted a weight. I think because, my dad was part of the air crew. He was on deck at the time, flight engineer Gordon Brooks. And, I know my dad. I knew the men he flew with. You know what, they were good at their job, they knew what they were doing, they really loved to fly. But at the same time, when you hear it said that their negligence or their lack of attention to detail has caused this accident, you know what, I was 14 at the time, 15, and it stuck. I worried, I thought, my God, my dad caused the death of all these people. Because I was a teenager, I'm just trying to struggle to understand it. And and I knew that they wouldn't have knowingly done that because I knew how good they were I knew how good they were at what they could do. I knew how much flying meant to them. And of course, when you hear about the whiteout, the wrong coordinates, there is no doubt they were not at fault. But that thing lingers, and to hear this today was actually really emotional and really lifting a weight.
So that weight on your back, it sounds almost like guilt, was it?
I don't know if guilt's the word, but because I really didn't believe, I knew deep down that there's no way that they had contributed to the accident, because I knew how conscientious they were, I knew how good they were at their jobs, I know how much they love to fly. I mean, these were old school flight crew that could fly through anything. They could fly blind through whatever, but obviously in this case, they were misled by the coordinates, the wrong coordinates. They were misled by a whiteout, and I think Air New Zealand has to bear some responsibility for not training their crews how to fly in those conditions. So, I don't know if guilt's the word, but I think it's that 14 or 15-year-old me that still thought, oh my God, does my dad have something to do with this? That I just, that still sits there in the back of my mind, I guess. So hearing this today, I think I'm still processing it. It's huge, actually.
So that burden that you carried as a young teenager, I mean, what effect do you think that's had on you over the years? Oh,
I think it caused a lot of shame for a long time. I just didn't tell people who my dad was. I didn't talk about the accident for years after it, probably for quite a few years to people. I didn't tell friends. I didn't, I didn't tell people because I just didn't want to go there. And I was still trying to figure out what the hell had happened because there was all the controversy over what had caused the accident. And, I was trying to piece together the pieces for myself. So I just didn't talk to people for a long time about it.
So
which isn't great when you're trying to get over grief and people don't understand that you're actually grieving.
So also today, the chair of Air New Zealand apologised too.
How courageous. How courageous. Huge. Thank you for that. I think it's very meaningful. I never thought I'd hear that, to be honest.
Why not?
Because it's a controversy that's raged on so deep for so long that, and there's so much politics behind the scenes, I just figured that ship had sailed, putting it bluntly. And I'm so glad that we've had this apology. It is it's meaningful. And, you know, I'm here today and the other relatives, and I'm seeing the impact of it for other people and what it means. And that's huge.
So in that room, when these two women issue this apology, gives a feeling for what it was like.
It's a very formal occasion, so I waited to, you know, they said it and I waited for a minute to see if people were going to, you could hear some tears, you could hear some gasps and tears, but no one started clapping or cheering or anything like that because it wasn't that type of occasion. But it was, I think a bit of a stunned silence as well, and nobody was expecting that, or certainly I wasn't. I don't know if others were, but I wasn't. So it was quite gobsmacking.
It must be pretty bittersweet 40 years on.
Yeah, and I think, yes, good word for it. Yeah.
So your father, Gordon, he was a flight engineer, and you were about, 14, 15 at the time, you say?
14.
Yeah, so his voice was heard on the flight recording, yes?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
I've never heard it. I've never actually heard the flight recording, but in the transcript I mean, I think it shows Dad's dedication to his job, that he could be counting down the altitude while that plane, you know, in those final moments, because they wouldn't have understood. They didn't know that they were about to hit a mountain. And you just hear their procedural, on that black box, you hear them going through procedure. You know, they're hearing the whoop, whoop, pull up, pretty loud when you're in the cabin. And they would have, because they were good at what they did, they're reacting to procedure, and that's what you hear on the black box in those last moments.
Your dad doing his job right till the end.
Yeah, right till the end. And probably thinking, what the hell? Because their eyes are telling them one thing and their instruments are telling them something else. They would have been thoroughly confused, I think, in that moment as to what the heck was going on. And whether they ever got a chance to comprehend. I mean, they died so quickly. So whether they ever got a chance to comprehend, probably not.
Does today change anything for you?
Yeah, that I can feel that tangible lifting of a bit of weight, and it's just amazing, actually.
And that was Virginia Brooks. Her father, Gordon Brooks, was on the Air New Zealand Flight 901 that crashed in Erebus, killing all on board 40 years ago. She welcomes that apologies today from the Prime Minister and Air New Zealand. That's all we've got time for this evening. We'll catch you again tomorrow.